welcome back to my channel. It's a bit of a funny angle, so sorry about that, but my phone is on charge. I wanted to do a video because I literally have felt the urge to again, and it's basically just going to be about like shitty consequences and consequences of like things, how people's actions can like negatively affect you, I find, and also like how like I feel like when, like, there's always someone, and I've noticed this happens, I've noticed, like, this happened a few times to me, where something bad happens, but then something, like, equally good happens, or something happens where you see someone else in a situation, or something else happens that either makes it, like, make sense why it happened, whether it makes sense to you consciously, or something ends up being better. I've heard this in Elevation Church before, where, like, I love it when that happens, like, I'm on talking and, like, it literally just makes things, like, it puts a positive spin on it, or I don't even mean it to, but I think, like, that's always good when that happens. But I swear, like, sometimes I've noticed where things happen, and it's just, like, either, usually, this is the way it goes, it feels like things are going fine and great, something really shit happens every now and again, and you just, like, it's the end of the world, basically, and then you realise it's probably not the end of the world, and then a little bit more time goes by and it all resolves itself out. But in the meantime, while a bit more time goes by, you kind of realise, you kind of learn other stuff along the path, and I swear that's been like a recurrent kind of pattern for me, whether that's to do with what kind of time period we're in at the moment in the world or whatever, you know, that probably is, you know, though I don't, you know, that being what it is, I don't know, I just feel like that's kind of a thing at the moment, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't really talk about astrology too much, but I'm careful about what I do and don't go into with New Age, only because I don't think everyone is spiritual. It even says in the Bible, like, a third of people in the world are spiritual, another third are carnal, and another third are action. I'm not even going to go into that stuff, but when I talk about things like astrology, it's kind of, it's not that I'm trying to build my channel or I'm not trying to put people off. It is a little bit because of that, but I just felt called to, that's why I made my New Age to Jesus video, because even though I think there is something to be said for, I don't know, so I don't want to validate and I don't want to say what to believe, what not to believe, but just the way that I think the world is at the moment, be that whatever it is, though there is a little bit to be said in astrology that validates this, because of the fact Saturn and Uranus are ruling this time period. Saturn is about kind of like mishaps and things going wrong, difficulties. Uranus, which is the other planet, is about transcendence. So it really does make a lot of sense that things go wrong, you know, but it's not so wrong that it ruins your life, but it feels wrong and more difficult than it did before we kind of transitioned from Pisces, where Neptune was what was ruling it. And they're like, I'm not going to talk about astrology, but just to give a bit of preface, and this is the way I see it and the way that it makes sense to me as well, is that Neptune was, I'll get to the point, ruling the last astrological era where everything was kind of, it's about more kind of like, not necessarily deception, but kind of something different. It's kind of fantasy in a way, was kind of something that, you know, was about Neptune, kind of, you know, lies and sort of stuff, helped you make sense of stuff, where we're in a different astrological era now, so it feels a little bit less light-hearted, a little bit more heavy and more difficult, because the way that Saturn works and because of the way it is, it's a different planet that is ruling this astrological era, and as I said, Uranus, it's about transcendence. So yeah, it really does make a lot of sense, but I want to talk about it more because, you know, I'm not saying, again, just want to quickly disclaim astrology, not necessarily for everyone. Please don't be scared off my channel because you think I'm some new age hippie and my life's going to only spiral downwards because I have looked into astrology in the past, even though I don't, you know, live by it. It's not divine necessarily in a totality, so it's not like worship astrology. I would definitely say no, but anyway, I don't want to go into all that now. I probably will do more of a spiritual video soon, because I did film one recently, but again, I'm like, I just talk about what I feel called to talk about. So anyway, disclaiming that aside, don't do a great deal of astrology anymore, so it's not really like a massive topic on my channel. Might touch on it from time to time, but it's not a massive part of my life, and I definitely stand by my New Age to Jesus video at the same time. So yeah, Anyway, it does make sense though, given saying all that, because yeah, I feel like just stuff repeatedly happens. I feel like it's just about mindset shift. For me, that is going to be helpful to deal with it, because another thing, just to bring up astrology again, that is changed is that there's 3 different types of time periods in an astrological era, and we've gone from this sort of very communicative, very kind of high level communication in Pisces, where we were very able to be very intricate. We were very kind of in the most developed part of Pisces, like our lineage and our development had gone through the very basic primal stage, which is where we're at in the next new astrological era, and the medium stage of kind of figuring it out, and there's a third one of like very advanced, really understanding Pisces and having that integrated into our species, or whatever the hell you want to look at it. But we're in a much more primal period at this point, and very much more of a you know, that sort of mindset. So I think this can just come with a lot of issues for many people, because, you know, I think it makes I think honestly deception is an issue that I'm seeing come up. You know, and I can say that kind of myself as well, I suppose. Just like anyone, I think deception is an issue, and I think narcissism has been an issue, possibly also you could put this into, because the issue with the transition between Pisces, I don't want to like relate it all to astrology because it's not going to make sense and it's not going to be relevant to everyone, so I'm going to try and put it, you know, in a slightly different way. But as I mentioned, in the old astrological era, it was about fantasy and deception and things like that were what was ruling it, and I think people have to adjust their mindset, because ego is a powerful thing and it's a very kind of driving factor to our belief system and obviously our experiences as well. But it's very common for people to like go through an experience, not always. I think it's really important to obviously like, keep yourself in check, and like most people will do that, but I also think that some people, if they like especially fall on the narcissistic spectrum, or I don't know, people can go through traumas and they can really have this like belief system that is protective, but it might not be necessarily. I think there's always a sense of functionality, and I think there's also a sense of truth often as well, which comes from a belief system. I think not getting it confused with imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is something different, and I think that's like the other end of the spectrum. So I think just kind of really navigating the world in the best way, because even though we're in this like very primal time, I feel like it's also not about like castrating yourself overly, or even like ignoring your instincts, because we're also in a very kind of instinctual, there's this kind of astrology thing as well, that this thing called Eris is in Aries. I don't know if it still is, I think it's actually moved out now, but for a little while, just after lockdown, there was this kind of astrology thing, which basically meant that everyone really is in tune with their inner needs and is really kind of forcing that out into the collective, because we're very much run by ourselves now rather than other people, but just because of the fact I think we're in more of a primal time, and we're all navigating it in a more individualistic way than in the last one. So anyway, slightly moving away from astrology, or yeah, completely moving away from astrology, I definitely feel like this is relevant because, you know, I feel like as much, again, this is where the balance is, I think, and I think probably everyone will have this. I'm not gonna like do like a whole like massive rant on this, but you know, it's also, again, not putting yourself in check about the whole imposter syndrome thing, because it's definitely not about, as I said, castrating yourself or, you know, not standing up for your beliefs. Everyone will stand up for their beliefs, but I think because I think, do you know what, it's really not to do with astrology necessarily. It is, but it's also like there's always going to be differences of opinion, and there's always going to be conflict, and there's always going to be difficulty. It's just come in a slightly different container because of the astrology change, and I think that's quite difficult sometimes to manage, especially for me, that I'm seeing. But I think it is important to keep in mind that like everything is relative, and I feel like it is important to keep in mind that, you know, not everything, like there's always will have been hardship. If you look back with a lens of truth rather than a lens of trauma or a lens of rose-coloured spectacles, and really have that like clear mindset, like it really is like so true that everything is relative. And And like, just as like one thing might be really bad in one period and one season, not to get too like churchy, but like one period of time, like one like, I do believe in seasons. I do honestly believe in seasons. Like, as much as like I'm not gonna like preach like church life and stuff, I did used to go to church and stuff, but I've used to watch Elevation Church, but I definitely believe in like, you struggle for a season or a few seasons, and then something else comes up and you have like a new challenge or a new life situation, or no challenge, hopefully, you know, especially in a period or another. I definitely think you can just get stuff resolved where you don't have to go back to that issue. I think that's kind of the idea usually. Not to say that people can't struggle with things for long periods of time, you know, horrible things can happen, and you know, the worst can happen and stuff. I'm also making more peace with death though. As much as I'm like, the worst can happen, I don't want to like start talking too much about death, but I also think like, I look more, again, I don't really want to get into spirituality, but I definitely feel like I've made more peace with death, because I used to like, I don't even want to go into why, but I also feel like it's also something where like, I used to think like death is like the worst thing, and often it is, and you know, people die every day and all that stuff. Sorry, I look really holy, like it makes sense, but I just thought that's just something that I used to do, and I feel like it kind of makes sense just like for respect. You know, it might not be everyone's thing, but I also think, yeah, like, death sounds like the worst thing, and I suppose it is in many people's situations, especially with people that are left behind. But I also feel like, you know, those people are at peace, and you know, whether they like reincarnate or, you know, they live in heaven forever or whatever, is a place where, like, you know, you've got to think they're at peace, and for, you know, wherever they go. And that's a nice thought, because obviously, you know, people consider them being still dealing with the struggles of Earth, and Earth is hard enough as it goes, to be fair. So that was really deep. I'm not gonna like, I'm just gonna rant on as long as I feel is appropriate, but whoever wants to watch it will, and whoever doesn't won't. But yeah, as I was saying, yeah, I just feel like these things come up, like, you know, in terms of the primal stuff and the kind of ego issues that come around people being more individualistic, and also just people's differences again, which really, even though it might be kind of presented in a way because of the astrology difference that we've experienced, it's also like, that stuff has always happened, and that stuff will always happen regardless of what kind of astrology is going on or not, to be fair. You know, do I think there can be certain biases? You know, again, there's always been biases. There's always been people's opinions being misled. There's always been people's ignorance of actually, you know, there is sense in doing certain things that, you know, you might not have considered, and sort of God or the universe or whatever gives you situations to help you grow and help you kind of transcend, help you actually marginalize or minimize, or actually put in a reframed box certain things. I just think you're attracted to what you experience what you're supposed to experience, honestly. But it's not always easy, and this is kind of what I feel like I want to just like kind of put out a bit more, because it can be a real struggle. And what really sucks, and something, to be honest with you, that's always been an issue that I've really thought was relevant, is that you can have on paper so many things, but in reality you may feel horrible. And that is just so true. And it's just because people in the contrasted situation really, I feel like it's a sense of longing that they have. So you can see someone in a position that you really want and consider their life to be perfect, but at the same time, this is the honest truth, I grew up in a middle class household. I've done a video recently about my financial changes to less of a, like, more of a working class income. You can have, and I was middle class, but I wasn't, and I spoke about on there, like, I wasn't necessarily happier for it, even though my family may have been less stressed by finances. It doesn't make your life quality any better necessarily. Money means nothing, to be honest. It does for security and stress and stuff. If you are really struggling with money, it does kind of make a difference on a level, but at the same time, it doesn't mean necessarily that you are any happier, you know. And they do say people in like third world countries sometimes have like certain not always third world countries, but you do hear about stuff like that where people say like the rate of happiness or something can be higher in obviously it depends from person to person, situation. It's not like obviously people are still people and whatever, but you know, you do hear about stuff like that. And you could literally have all of the money in the world. You could have all of the social life in the world. I definitely believe as well that like you can have so many people, and this was an issue for me at school, you could have the whole world around you and still feel lonely. I'm not saying that like this was me the whole time, but I literally was on a bus with friends from my primary school, but literally I've known them pretty much my whole life, really well. I knew them, but you can still feel alone when you're off fragmenting into each separate life and whatever. It doesn't mean they feel that need for connection that you have necessarily. You can have the whole world around you. You can have all the money around you. It doesn't buy happiness. It doesn't even buy necessarily needs met necessarily. Apart from you might have like more needs like around food and stuff or shelter. And again, you can have no home, but you can still. I'm not saying these things are all good. You can have no home and you can be happier than someone who lives in a mansion. Again, but I think it's the contrast is when like you've not had a home, you appreciate your home, and you've not had money, you appreciate your money. But I feel like to a level though, there is only a certain level of pleasure and joy that can come from material things. And I think that's probably still a lesson that I'm learning, to be honest, because I feel like I became a bit more materialistic once I'd experience like struggling with my home situation and then moving and feeling more like secure again. But the fact still goes that material things do not constitute, even, I'm not being funny, friendships. You can have all the friendships in the world. Like you can have really great friends and something can be going on that just means you don't feel good. And I look back and I think in terms of relativity, I've had really, really hard times. I've been really struggling with my mental health, like really struggling, like actually medicated, you know, dealing with the repercussions of extreme trauma and mental illness, pretty much, having extreme stressful situations of school and family and everything, and really not having much of a place to have an outlet there, but still feel not in the place and dealing with the struggles or the situations or even the mental struggles that come with that sort of stuff, not necessarily from an illness perspective but from a life perspective, that may kind of surround that sort of, you know, that might be separate. And, you know, it's always a relative struggle, and unfortunately that's kind of the sad facts of it. And I feel like it's important to have a good mindset in life, because it's not worth saying like, you know, if it's not mental health then it's money, if it's not money then it's housing, if it's not housing then it's something else, or your family or your work or this or that. And you know, I do 100% believe that everything is relative, you know, especially when it comes to like the extent of what you deal with as well, because I think being you know, hungry for a day, you know, but then being fed and housed for the rest of your season may be less impactful than someone who is struggling for money and is able to feed themselves but sometimes misses a few meals because their budget doesn't quite stretch far enough and they're housed the whole time. So this is what I mean about relativity. And like, you know, it's just at the same time, I always look at it as like an overview as much as I can. I don't know if this video is a bit rambly and whether it's actually going to go up. I'm hoping it does, because I haven't made very many videos recently and I feel like the people that do want to watch them sometimes get stuff from it and I get something from it from watching it back and stuff. But I also just wanted to touch on like the issues when it comes to things impacting you and other people's issues impacting you, because I feel like I've spoken about this before. I experienced mental health issues in the past. I definitely feel like I was someone that really minimised myself, whether that was because I was a female, whether that was because I had traumas in the past, whether that was because I had the specific home situation that I had, whether that was because I had certain traumas or whatever. It doesn't really make a massive difference, but as I say, they say people either like change to fit other people, or they kind of, I can't remember what the two things you can go down is. You can either sacrifice yourself for people, or you can change to try and make other people happy. I think it's something like that is the two ways that you can go. I don't think I'm a self-sacrificer as much as I don't think I'm a people pleaser either, but I do think that I've been known to change myself for the benefit of others just because I felt obligated to. And that being something like probably different, it's more probably a fawning response, you know, rather than like a freeze response. It's probably what that is, and it's something different. But when things happen to you, it's just like so important, because like people at the end of the day, regardless of what their issues are, I swear I spoke about this like in my last video I posted, regardless of what someone's issues are and someone else's issues are, it really doesn't matter your position. Not to say your character isn't built by experiences, not to say that, but your instincts are always right. You know, if you've had trauma, like, listen, I'm not gonna gaslight people and say if you've had trauma that changes anything, because at the end of the day, people are who they are. Like, I feel like I'm very like aware of the impact of trauma on people's lives and the impact of social stuff on people's lives, just because I'm that way inclined. But it's not to say that everyone has that mindset. And also it means that, you know, like, you are your number one, your priorities are your number one, whether that means your life circumstances. I definitely think there's like a hierarchy though of like what should take priority, but I also think that this comes with kind of knowledge, morality that some people actually don't have the ability to possess. I think it goes with your mindset and your priorities. Like, if you're a selfish person, or you're an unexperienced person, or someone that hasn't experienced much hardship, you know, that in a certain way, or you are selfish, or you have your priorities on money or something like that, you may not even have the capacity, to be honest, to evolve to a place of, or honestly comprehend a place of someone else's circumstances. And that's just the truths of the world. Often those people are around, you will come across them, but at the same time, like, that's just the fact. Like, not everyone wants to or can actually comprehend someone else's point of view. Often their experience can shine light on someone else's life, and you might unfortunately be that person that person didn't understand. You took the brunt of them because they didn't understand you, and then in a few seasons you're the lesson for them. I think you can be someone's lesson, but what really sucks is that, because people in my life have been my lesson and I'm a better person for it, but what sucks is when you're someone's lesson and you get fucked, basically, sorry to swear, and they're left kind of as a learner, and that's kind of it, you know, and you get fucked over for pretty much no reason. And that's a real fucker, because, you know, you're there like, oh great, like, I've got, you know, I've kind of been this person's lesson. Oh great, maybe I wasn't in the wrong, obviously, in the first place, but like, it still sucks because you might not get any justice, because I'm sorry, that's just how karma works. Like, your karma of someone else, you know, you might not give karma back to them. Their karma might come from someone else. They might not deserve any karma for whatever reason, or they might. I definitely think everything comes back to you in some way or another, to be honest. But it's not for you, I've noticed, to necessarily, unless you want to give them back the same karma that they caused you, because it might not necessarily be directly from them that caused it and stuff like that. You know, I'll leave the word of revenge up to other people. I don't really stand too highly on revenge, just because I don't think it really makes anything better necessarily. I do stand by boundaries, but I think sometimes if you're choosing to have revenge, it's not always the best thing. But again, we're all human beings. I would say just make that decision as you wish. But in my experience, it's not always been helpful. You know, so yeah, it's when you're caught out. And to be honest with you, like, I think there is a sense of sometimes people do shit things and wind you up, and you can react in exactly the right way to give them just the reaction that they, to be honest with you, conjured up within you through their actions. At the same time, you know, I'm not justifying anyone's actions by doing that, but it, you know, it's like you've got to keep, I wouldn't say you've got to keep in mind who you're talking to, because at the same time you've got to like prioritise yourself, and you've got all sorts of people in the world, and there's going to be so many people that are like so misled, and they've got their own like mindset, which to be honest with you isn't necessarily wrong on a universal level, but it will be different, and it will be kind of different to yours and just in their lives, but it's not for you to justify that within yourself. And that's where the issue is for me, because it's like, you know, when what's to say that when one person is morally right and another person is morally right, but it causes this like issue either on each other or on some other sort of circumstance and kind of butterfly effect, which to be fair, everything has a butterfly effect, you know, it can just cause a bit of a collision, and you know, it just is what it is. Like, you know, sometimes no one is completely in the right and sometimes no one is completely in the wrong. But as someone that has repressed themselves in the past, I can't put forward, because many people will do the same, and not bat an eyelid about it. If you struggle with assertiveness, to still assert yourself. If someone fights that, and especially if they win, if they were unjust and they did, you know, I think it was bullying, to be honest, and I think this is just a bit of a like massive therapy moment for me and revelation. I think when I was bullied in my school before I moved, I definitely like feel like I lost parts of myself, and I like fragmented part of my personality, because it was, to be honest, from like a coping strategy, because like I'm so overwhelmed, and I think just on a like mental level, like I just kind of adjusted to what I thought was going to cause me less struggle. And I think I've just kind of carried that forward, but throughout later years, and especially through like therapy and stuff, because I did have mental health problems, and you know, it really is so important to be integrated as a person, and also to not let other people like, you know, decide for you what parts of you come out and don't come out. As I say, character building is important, so I do think, as I said, like sometimes fragmenting parts of I wouldn't say fragmenting is not good necessarily, but the brain is an adaptable thing, and your brain does fragment, or kind of, I don't know if the word fragment is the right word to say. Adapt, I think, is the better word, because I think fragment actually connotes trauma, whereas adapt and adjust and build pathology to support you, because at the end of the day as well, we've all got capacity, and we've all got a certain amount of capacity, and that capacity will be due to belief system, who you are as a person, what predispositions you have, what disabilities you have, autism, ADHD, whatever, what kind of upbringing you've had, what trauma you've had, what lifestyle you've had, rich, poor, you know, what nationality you are, you know, and all of this adds up to create this capacity. And you know, you do get people that really, because of whatever reason, because of their own capacity, to be honest, to empathise with another person actually, and because of their own inferiority complexes, because of their own karma, because of their own lifestyle, because of their own belief system, because of their own biases, because of their own discriminatory beliefs, because of their own ability to act out, and because of any of the above, and their own whatever, you know, they will attack you, you know, and they will potentially cause fragmentation of your personality, and you may associate, and this is what they love to do, negative influence from them to be a reason for you to not express parts of yourself, assert yourself in certain ways. And the thing is about this is that often this is exactly what they want, especially when it comes to people on the narcissistic spectrum, and to be honest, people that are jealous in general, often can and have varying degrees of ability to condition you to actually disregard parts of yourself that do not suit either their ego, their belief system, their biases, their discriminatory beliefs, their traumas, their limitations, to be honest. If they perceive you to be in your way for whatever reason, to actually even feel like a threat in whatever reason, for a justified reason or an unjustified reason, they may act out too much. They may damage you. They may damage your ego. They may damage you physically. They may damage, and this is, again, another thing where it's important as someone to, I don't want to say, you just have to put yourself first, because at the end of the day, I think this is the resolution I'm coming to here, which is that your mindset and your life circumstances and your capacity and your belief system has no real effect on another person. You can't change another person. Your understanding, you can have all the empathy in the world and all the understanding in the world. It doesn't mean that you, from an internal person, we are genetically designed to protect ourselves and to actually maintain homeostasis. Is that the right word? Homeostasis, I think. In our body and in our system and in our psyche and in everything, and remain untraumatized, safe and healthy. So you can have all the understanding in the world of someone else's circumstances, why they might have attacked you. It doesn't change the fact that you were attacked, and it doesn't change the fact that you had your own right to actually be your own self. I'm not saying there aren't things like mismatches of opinions and stuff, but I also think that from a moral level and a moral standpoint, you know, especially when it comes to, in my circumstance, what happened with me, bullying in childhood, you're going to get all sorts of different characters, and you're going to get all sorts of different kind of concoctions of, you know, injustice within, especially within children, within hormonal children, more so than in adulthood. I do think it definitely levels out. But, you know, when it comes, and also you're so much more vulnerable as a child, and when you're not got that full adult brain, and you are so much more kind of easily influenced by your peers, because, you know, there's such a big pressure to, when you're institutionalized in a school and stuff, to actually survive it, because it can be quite daunting, and it can be just like very isolating if you haven't got that sort of peer backing or peer kind of, you know, sort of support, or, you know, or you're sort of like discriminated against in some way or another, or something like that, or bullied or whatever. It can be very, very damaging long term, and I think as children we know this, and so we have this like real pressure. And I think this is why you do get childhood bullies and stuff, because I think they, from a childhood level even, actually, and it happens in adulthood as well, but I think even from a childhood level, they see this, and they see that, you know, they have the power and the ability, if they're mentally developed enough that someone else might not be, that they have the ability to kind of really warp someone's self-perception and really take advantage of another child, and really kind of put them at a disposition. And I think that's definitely what happened to me, because from a moral standpoint, I shouldn't have been bullied, regardless of what impact I may or may not have had on them, regardless of what impact, you know, that, you know, my lifestyle caused upon them, if any. Really, like, I feel like everyone goes through problems, and I think it's a real sense of scapegoating to put that all onto one person, or all onto one kind of circumstance. And I think it's really, this is why bullying is such an awful thing, because, you know, children especially can be so dysregulated, and it is very common within human groups, apparently, from a psychological level, to scapegoat someone, but it's never right. You know, really, it might be adaptable, and obviously from a primal level, you know, the weakest link gets fed to the tigers, and, you know, gets fed to like, you know, an animal, and that animal might leave or something, or they might be kind of expelled from a tribe, and then the tribe is more kind of adaptable to actually live in harmony or whatever, if that kind of was the case. But it doesn't mean that, like, that person that was scapegoated or expelled or whatever was wrong. It just means that they were different, and that is not a crime, to be honest with you. Obviously, if it's a crime, then it's a crime, but you know, it's really not for anyone being a child or having any sort of differences to really actually be able to impact someone on that level, especially in childhood, and that's why it's so wrong. And yeah, this is like just turned into this therapy session for me, but yeah, you know, and that's where my issues with assertiveness came, but at the same time, you know, you're going to come with people, you're going to come up with people that are trying to kind of you know, displace an unhealthy, unfair, unjust level of something, shame and rage and anger and harm upon you for really no reason whatsoever. And it could be because they've had a bad day, it could be because that happened to them in childhood or in their current life situation, or they could have a shitty boss or something, and that's how they're managed, so they believe it's okay. But at the same time, as long as you are integrated enough to have a level mindset and you stand by your own moral standpoint, whether that's culturally influenced or not, because I also think cultures can be extremely scapegoated because of certain ways that they go about stuff, and really, in balance, cultures have existed for hundreds of thousands of years and have adapted through the world for hundreds of thousands of years. Scapegoating certain communities really is not the answer to the justice between a one-to-one person, because if you don't have the understanding of culture and people's cultures and people's cultural norms, that's on you, and that's not respectful to other people's lifestyles. Just because you don't have a culture or a religion or something like that doesn't mean that other people don't, and it doesn't mean that you're not crossing serious boundaries by not acknowledging them. So you can't sit back and say, oh well, you know, they acted so out of order in my eyes through my beliefs. Well, you might not be looking at their beliefs. You can't, if you're ignorant, then you're blind. You need to be awake and you need to be aware of other people. You can't be walking through the world blind and then actually, you know, people do, and it's what people do, but you can't expect people to just live through your lens all the time, because that's not the world we are. I mean, we live through our own lens, and our own lens is the most important thing, but you also have to be aware of other people's lenses and how they're very different, and how, you know, they're not going to be the same as yours, and that, you know, just and the fact that you have a certain belief system and certain things within you doesn't mean that it's the same in them. So I feel like I should stop now, because I have been talking for like 40 minutes and swear, like, this has just been me like reconciling my bullying experiences for most of it. But you know, if anyone has got to this point, you know, I can't send you any payment, but thank you for being my therapist. But yeah, I feel like it is important to integrate all of yourself, and you know, people don't always acknowledge the hardships that happen to them, especially when they're in a vulnerable place, childhood or any vulnerable place, to be honest. And it's just important to recognize your own capacity, other people's not, you know, getting out of order and out of line. If they're kind of disrespecting you, or not necessarily even if they're stepping over your mark and over your boundary, that's really on them, and it's really just not something that you have to take on necessarily, especially if you're not obligated to, and that is really on them to manage themselves. So, and just to know that, like, you know, some people do step out of line and take the piss, and it takes two to cause this collision, and it doesn't make you a bad person because you were scapegoated, or you were misunderstood, or you were triggered, or you even did something wrong. You know, it doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't make you someone that deserved necessarily the repercussions of acting through your instincts, because your instincts are usually right. And what really sucks is when you've been made to repress your instincts through trauma or whatever, and you have a real trigger to other people, and that could just be because that's the character you've got, to be honest. You know, the character that you've got might just be because of your lifestyle, your life experiences, and that's just the way it works usually. But you know, just because someone has certain life experiences and certain character, and you have certain life experiences and certain character, does not make them more just than you, and it doesn't mean that you should let someone steamroller you. It doesn't mean you have to convince them necessarily of the justice for you, but it also means that, you know, maybe you can come to some sort of understanding and sort of like a reconciliation level, but often there are a lot of assholes and there are a lot of people that really are very, very selfish and very, very misled and deceived often, and they really don't have potentially at that time the maturity level or the capacity to actually have understanding of other people. Their ego may be so confused or actually embarrassed and ashamed at themselves that they're really unable to see the situation for what it is, either at that time or ever. So, you know, it is what it is. I've heard that, I don't want to go to narcissism now, some people have issues with narcissism, but it is said that like narcissists in particular as well don't acknowledge their actions and the repercussions of their actions, and sociopaths as well, to be fair, don't. But again, you could scapegoat any sort of mental disorder here, so let's not get too deep into it. But yeah, stand by yourself. You are a warrior, and you have to prioritise your own wants and needs and your own priorities over other people's, even if there's opposition, because there will be. You have to keep yourself integrated and I would say aware to a level, but you know, if you're working at your capacity and other people are expecting you to work at a capacity you don't have, or to be at a capacity you don't have, it's for you to recognise that it's a misexpectation, and there's something in them going on that means that they aren't able to healthily measure someone else's capacity, and that they are expecting too much, and that they are in the wrong therefore in that situation, because you know, they don't have the right to sort of override your capabilities because they have some sort of ego expectation that someone should comply to them. That's really disordered to me. So anyway, that's it now. Thanks for listening. Bye.